My dad worked mostly early morning hours, but sometimes he had to work evenings. He worked for a grocery store as a butcher, and so he had different swing shifts that he had to pull. And oftentimes, when my mom would have these drinking binges, it was normally while he was at work. She would go to the liquor store, get super hammered within two or three drinks within literally 30 minutes, ride that drunken high until pretty much it was about time for him to come home. She would sleep it off. He would come home and he wouldn't know the wiser. He just thought she was taking a nap. And I remember every day he would come home and he would say, "Where's your mother?" And I would say, "In the bedroom." And, he would go and decompress and wake her up for like 30 minutes and then, come downstairs and get ready to go do either a second job or go work with one of his brothers on a construction site. He was always working, always moving, always doing. So, with that being said, a lot of times my mom would then drink again or do something else. And I remember one night in particular, he had to work a night shift and she wasn't really acting quite right. She was trying to tickle me and bite me, and she thought she was being loose and funny. And at first she was. And then she bit me. And I went, "Ow, you bit me." And she said to me, "I'm not your mother," and goes and slunkers away. She goes downstairs and she starts cooking something. And I'm like, "Mom, what did I do to upset you?" "I told you, I'm not your mother." And it was like this emotional whiplash. And I remember being 12 years old and going, "What in the world is going on?" And so I called my dad at work and I said, "Dad, there's something wrong with mom. I don't know what, but she's acting really strange. And this is what she did. And this is what she's saying. And I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what I don't know what I could have done." He tells me to put her on the phone. They talk for a minute. They put me back on the phone and he says to me, "You tell your mother, and I'm telling you, don't ever call me at work again tonight. I have to get things done." And I said, "Okay." So I hang up the phone. I tell my mom what he said. And she goes to call him. And I said, "No, he said not to call him." So I'm pressing the hang up button on the receiver. I'm having this argument with her. He said not to call him at work. He has to work. Don't bother him. She proceeds to throw me into a wall and yank my hair as I'm trying to grab her hand from my neck. She is grabbing my hands, yanking my hair out. I've got blood running down my face. And she gives him a call. And she talks to him for a minute. She hands the phone off to me and he yells at me, "I thought I told you. Don't call me at work." "I didn't call you. She did. She won't listen to me. She's telling me I'm the child. She's the adult." He's like, "Well, then we'll talk about this when we get home." At that moment, I think my mom realized what she did wrong because I ran upstairs and I barricaded myself in my bedroom and I pushed my dresser in front of the door. I didn't just lock the door because I knew she knew how to unlock it. I pushed heavy items in front of it so she couldn't get in. She was banging on the door, screaming, apologizing. I didn't mean it. I didn't know what I was doing, the whole 9 yards. And I just said, "I will wait here until Dad gets home." She must have gone to go sleep it off. He gets home. He knocks on my door. He hears me push the dresser away. And he's like, "What are you doing?" He took one look at me and the dried blood that was down my face. And he was like, "Oh no." That was one of those nights. And there were many nights that I had heard them argue about how she can't treat me like that and the money that he spent in adopting me and how CPS is going to come and take me away and then it'll be a waste of all the money that he spent in adopting me. That was just one of quite a few nights that we would have while my dad was at work. Another night, mom got so blackout drunk that she passed out on the toilet. And she was weighing more than me. And I remember literally punching her in the face because I was worried she was dead, because I didn't know if she was even breathing. And I remember dragging her to her bed once I realized that she was breathing. After pulling up her pants and dragging her over into her bed, I once again called my dad and said, I don't know what's wrong. We checked her sugar. We checked everything. We were really scared. And because she was a diabetic and often suffered from low sugar as well as high, and they would very much go up and down drastically during drinking binges, we always had to keep an eye on it. And so, I was scared that like her sugar had dropped too low, but to find out it didn't. But we couldn't figure out what had happened. So my dad just said, as long as her sugar's okay and she's breathing, just let her be. I made myself dinner that night. He got home. He woke my mom up, and she woke up like nothing happened. Meanwhile, for hours, I could not wake her up. She was so passed out drunk that I could not wake her up at all. But she knew what she was doing. She drank just enough that by the time he got home, he could wake her up, and acted as if nothing happened. And I just remember looking at her going, Mom, does your face hurt? And she was like, yeah, why is my face hurt? And I just remember being like, because you hit yourself on the floor. Like, I was trying to actually, she did fall on the floor on her face too. But it was also because I was punching her to try to wake her up because I was so scared that she was almost dead. Couldn't figure out why at the time. Hindsight being 2020, I know now that that was a drinking binge. And I remember my dad looking at me a little concerned and a little like, I'm sorry, kid, because this is what I dealt with on the evenings that he had to work. There were times that my mom would get us into car accidents. Either she had something to drink and hid it and just didn't tell us and would proceed to take us to anywhere, grocery store, a doctor's appointment. We just didn't know. There were times where she would take us to the liquor store. She would drink it right then and there. And by the time we got home, which was 2 miles away, we were veering off the road and she was passing out from how much she drank. It wasn't easy being the child of someone who had addictive tendencies. And oftentimes, because of my mother's illnesses, such as her diabetes or her seizures, we were told at a very early age she could die any day. And sometimes we were wondering if she was trying to kill us with her. Because, once again, it wasn't easy being in a car with someone who maybe nod out and wouldn't hit the brake in time. One time she did nod off, ran us up a hill, and we ended up having the paramedics called. Thankfully, I was okay, and so was she, but we had to go to the hospital because they insisted. And the worst injury I actually got was being burned by their hot cocoa machine. But that meant getting in a car with my mom was very nerve-wracking. And oftentimes, I could not wait to get my license. When I was 12 years old, my dad taught me how to ride the lawnmower so I could mow the grass. But that also taught me how to drive. And boy, I could not wait. But we were being taught at an early age to take care of ourselves, to feed ourselves, to care for the house, to clothe ourselves, do laundry, things like that. While becoming independent at an early age isn't a bad thing, having to be the adult in most situations was. And it wasn't easy when my mother would tell us, well, I'm the adult and you're the child. And she would put us in these really dangerous situations that we really wish we weren't in. So by the time I was 12 years old, oftentimes she would say, I'm the adult and you're the child. And I would be quipping back saying, well, then act like it. Stop putting us in bad situations and start being the adult and the responsible parent. My mom was the mom that thought that the DARE program that we all went in school, which was, DARE against drugs, and to not be, not do drugs. She thought that program was a way to get the police to get the children to rat on the parents. Between the ages of 12 and 15, my mother would often say, "You are too young to hang out with friends and too old to go out and play." For those 3 years, I went to school, I came home, I hung out in my bedroom. Every year I would start school and my mom would always ask me, "So, are you popular this year?" And I would say no. And when she would ask me why not, well, what was the point in having friends if I couldn't hang out with them outside of school? I wasn't exactly the best child either, and my punishment was taking my music away. So on top of being stuck in a room, four walls, I also had nothing to entertain myself with for about 2 years of that. The depression was really bad, and with that came my eating disorder. It was the only thing I could control. I couldn't control my mom. I couldn't control the situations that she was putting me in. All I could control was what I was eating and tried to control myself. So oftentimes I wouldn't eat breakfast. Sometimes I would forget to pack myself a lunch, and I would get picked on a lot at school. I didn't wear designer clothes. I just was a very skinny, scrawny child. Sometimes this one kid would call me a rat because he said that's what I looked like, was a rat. My hair was uncontrollable. I was a teenager, and it wasn't a great time in my life. I was also still being bullied by the neighbor that was next door. I remember one year it was picture day, and we got into a fight at the bus stop, and she put poison ivy down my dress. And by the time it was time to take the pictures, the poison ivy was actually showing on my skin on the pictures. Then I would come home from school. Sometimes I would be dragged off the bus by my neighbor, sometimes not. And I would then go to my room and I would sit there and wait for dinner. And I would come downstairs for dinner, and usually that was the only meal I would eat for the day. Sometimes my mom would then start a fight with me because for her, that was the only time she saw me. And I started learning that, well, throwing my plate on the counter wasn't enough. Sometimes I had to throw it in the trash because it was the only way that I could make my point. And sometimes when that happened, I would hear my dad argue with my mom again. "For real? It's the only meal she's eating for the day. It's the only time we're seeing her. Do you really have to pick a fight with her right now?" Food insecurity was a thing for us before the house was remodeled. My mom could only eat certain foods because of the diabetes, and we didn't have a lot of money. If you put more than 2 slices of ham on your sandwich, my mother, I should say, was going to punish you. The ice cream that my mom would get would be diabetic only, and children should not be eating those fake sugars because their kidneys can't process it. But because the ice cream was also so expensive, we couldn't afford to get anything else either, like normal ice cream for us children. We would eat the same ham sandwiches every day, or sometimes the same peanut butter and jelly every day. Sometimes I didn't eat breakfast because I didn't know what to even make for breakfast, or it was the same cereal every day. And I remember when we were living at my grandmother's house during the house remodel that I would say, "I'm hungry." And they would just say, "Go get a bowl of cereal." To this day, I don't think I could eat Cocoa Puffs ever again. When I was about 12 years old, my mom also went in for another major surgery. She was in the hospital for about 2 months. They had prepped us for that time with microwavable foods like ramen. Believe it or not, you can microwave ramen. Or these little 10-cent pot pies. Once again, to this day, I will never eat another frozen pot pie. If I make pot pie, I make it from scratch myself. I wasn't allowed to use the stove because they were worried I would hurt myself or burn the house down. My sister, who was 8 years older than me, was always working and had graduated high school. She was living at home a little bit, but once again, she was working full time. So she wasn't there to take care of me. If or when my dad was home at night, he would make dinner, and those were some really amazing dinners. But a lot of times, he too was going from work to the hospital to go visit my mom. This surgery in particular took a little bit more time for my mom to heal. Due to the fact that she was diabetic, her body didn't heal properly. So they had to keep the wound open and constantly pack it. She was trying to get the rest of her pancreas taken out, but unfortunately they couldn't do that, and she just bled everywhere. So they just stopped the surgery and tried to get her to heal. After about 2 months, they decided to bring her home, but with no nursing care. They said, it's okay, her daughters can take care of it. And they thought that my sister would have no problem packing a gut wound and seeing all of her intestines and everything else you could possibly think of. The first day, my sister tried her best with virtually no training. My mom walked downstairs to me and my sister, and she said, something doesn't feel right. And all of her packing fell out. And that was first of a few times that both my sister and I had seen all of my mother's intestines and everything inside of her. It freaked my sister out so badly that my sister literally packed up all her stuff and moved out the very next day. From then on, that's when we really learned how to take care of my mom. We had to do our best. My dad would try to pack her wounds as best as possible, and she would do the same. Eventually, I think we did have to bring in a nurse because we had to just say, look, we can't do this on our own. And I was 12 years old. I was not equipped to do that. Music was my passion. And honestly, what I really wanted to be when I grew up in life was a singer. I felt like I could write music and everything else. And I tried writing music, tried writing lyrics. And I remember one day my mom came into my room. They had gotten me a guitar, and she decided to go snooping through my room. Once again, she was drunk. I was literally sitting in my room. She just opened the door, and started going through things. And I was like, Mom, what are you doing? And she was like, well, I'm looking to see if you're hiding anything. And I was like, really? With me right here? And she fell over onto my guitar, broke the bridge of it, and I could never play the guitar again because we couldn't fix it. The only thing we could do was replace it, and there was no way they were going to replace it. I tried getting into chorus and tried singing, but all the chorus teacher would tell me was my voice wasn't good enough. At an early age, I kind of knew that the only thing I was going to be able to do in life was pretty much go into work. My family made it really clear that after high school, if I went to college, I was going to have to pay for it, that they weren't going to help, that it was either college, military, or work. And if I went to college, I was going to have to work at the same time. And I was going to have to pay rent to live there. We were already starting to pay rent at an early age, probably around 16 years old, I think it was when we started paying rent to my mom. But between the ages of 12 and 15, there wasn't really much I could do and much I could control. And one day, my sister came to visit, and she asked about how much I ate. She just watched me, and noticed that I was only eating maybe 800 calories a day. And I just kept saying, oh, I'm not hungry. Because honestly, what was the point in complaining? Oftentimes I would go to the doctor for my yearly physical. They would ask me, how's it going? And I would say, oh, Mom got me into another car accident again. And she would go, but she's not supposed to be driving. She had a seizure less than 6 months ago. And that would get Mom in trouble. And then I would get a stern talking to when I got in the car about how I'm not allowed to tell the doctor or tell people what goes on in our home. So there was no point in talking to people. I felt very much in despair. I felt like this was this was just how life is, and it's never going to get any better. And so they took me to the doctor, and my sister forced me to talk to the doctor about my eating habits. And one day it just came out. Look, my mom would literally wake you up from a dead sleep at 3 a.m. if there was a glass of water in the sink. She would scream at you if you came home and you left dishes in the sink from you having breakfast. What was the point in eating breakfast if I don't have time to clean the dishes and get on the bus? Oftentimes, I would forget or not have enough time to make lunch, or we were eating the same thing every day. So a lot of times I didn't eat lunch. And then dinner was the only meal that I got. And honestly, if she was going to pick a fight, well, I'd rather not eat that either. And it really started becoming clear that I had an eating disorder. And it was all because it was the only thing I could control. So my mom decided in front of the doctor, in front of my sister, she declared that if there was dishes in the sink from breakfast, she wouldn't yell at me about it. She would also pay for me to have lunch at school. These little lunch tickets, you would pay for lunch 2 weeks at a time. So there's no reason why I wasn't eating in the middle of the day. And that she would do everything she could not to pick a fight with me at dinner. I also was drinking Ensure as on top of the meals. So 3 times a day, I was drinking Ensures with my breakfast, lunches, and dinners. On top of that, it was going to start to be okay for me to use the stove to actually cook my meals. Because, well, let's be real. My mom was sick often. She had a few surgeries done. Sometimes she couldn't get out of bed due to a migraine or whatever the reason to cook us a meal. So she had to allow me to start using the stove so I could actually cook myself a hot meal. Because before that, if I was hungry, sometimes I would just eat frozen corn out of the bag, out of the freezer, because I wasn't allowed to heat it up on the stove. And to this day, my husband finds that so gross. But that's how my sister and I grew up. We would just eat cans of vegetables or cans of fruit because we weren't allowed to use the stove sometimes. So that's just what we ate, straight out of the can, or something that we could microwave. What I very much looked forward to was turning 15. I was told between the ages of 12 and 15, I was too old to go out and play, too young to hang out with friends. So I very much looked forward to 15. Why? Because then I could actually make friends that I could go and hang out with. And don't get me wrong, I tried to make friends between the ages of 12 and 15 and maybe have them spend the night. One friend of mine was very Christian, got me involved in a local youth group, and we would do Bible studies. And I thought this would be something that I could do that, yes, might be hanging out with friends, but it's a wholesome activity. We had Bible studies. It wasn't like I was out doing drugs or getting into trouble. Parents were supervising it. One time, we were at Bible study. It was at this house by the church. And my parents said they were going to come and pick me up at 9 o'clock. And so around 8:55, I went to go outside and the parents said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I have to go wait for my parents. I have to be early. I have to make sure I am waiting there when they pull up." And they said, "Oh no, we are not letting you go sit out in the dark all by yourself." So I waited at the house and waited to see if somebody would pull up. That was my parents, and no one ever did. Then afterwards, I went and sat out on the stoop of the church, and the parents said, "Are you sure you're okay?" And I said, I can't leave. I cannot leave this spot. If I do and my parents show up, I'm screwed. So I kept calling my parents, and no one would answer the phone. So finally, it was around 10 o'clock at night, and I walked across the street to my friend's house. Her mom was awake, and my friend was asleep. And she said, "What are you still doing here? Haven't your parents picked you up yet?" And I said, "No, unfortunately, they haven't, and I can't get through to them." We have caller ID though. If I call from your house, maybe they'll recognize the number and they'll answer it. So finally they do answer. My friend's mom had called them and said, your daughter's still here. You need to come and get her. And they said, oh, no, we're not coming to get her. She wasn't where she was supposed to be. She can walk home. And at that time, I was about 4 miles away from home. It was 10 o'clock at night. And my friend's mom literally said, no, you're going to come and get your daughter. She's not going to spend the night here. You're going to come and get her because that's what you're supposed to do. They came and got me. And trust me, there were some words said. And then on my way home that night, they looked at me and said, you are never going to this again. You are not allowed to go to Bible study. You are not allowed to hang out with these people anymore. I seriously didn't know what I did wrong. I didn't think I did anything wrong. I did exactly what everyone said. I was with adults. I wasn't doing anything wrong. We were studying a Bible. We were eating pizza. What could I have done wrong? To this day, I really don't understand it. But it was just another one of those situations where I just felt hopeless and in despair. And when people ask me, what triggered your eating disorder? It wasn't just one thing. It was many things. But at least when I turned 15, I could hang out with friends again. I could go get a job. And in the state of Maryland, when you're 15 years old and 9 months, you can go and start getting your learner's permit to learn how to drive a car. And that, to me, was the ultimate freedom.